What is going on, everyone? I'm your host. I'm getting spooky with Sean. Welcome to the graveyard. Sorry, the boneyard. Same thing. We're all going to end up there one day. Today, we got a really special guest. We got an awesome guest. I'm super excited to have her. She's a psychic medium, a death worker. We got Dominique. How you doing, Dominique?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Super busy morning, as I said, but everything happens for a reason, and you and I were talking about that before I hit record. I think everything happens for a reason. There's some things that kind of like happen in order to get you here, but I'm really excited to have you here, and I'm really excited to hear your story.
I am. I'm so excited. I absolutely agree with everything happens for a reason. I don't believe in accidents, and we have to figure out why they're happening. They're not always pleasant, but we still got to figure it out. That's our job.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I believe things in our life line up, and everybody always asks me, if you had to go back and change one thing in your life, what would it be? And I said nothing, absolutely nothing, because I'd have to end up at this point somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. 1,000% agree. My partner and I discussed that a lot, and we have this whole, like, well, what if we didn't do this? And I'm like, then I wouldn't be where I'm at right this very second. I'm not trying to mess with timelines, and no, I'm good. Thanks.
No, we see what
Perfect.
happened. We see what happened with timelines and Loki. We don't need to do
Right?
that.
Right. We're not jumping realities, my friend. Absolutely not.
No,
We're not doing
no,
that.
we're not touching timelines here.
No.
But anyways, Dominique, would you like to give a formal introduction of yourself?
My name's Dominique. I'm a medium and psychic and a death worker. We connect those that have crossed over with those that are still living. We have one-on-one clients. We do group sessions. We've worked with detectives to find missing people. We do all sorts of stuff. We're really big into advocating, talking about death and grief, and having these really taboo discussions. Because for some reason in our country, people are freaked out about death and the paranormal, and we just got to talk about it. The more we talk about it, the less weird it'll be. So that's what we do.
Absolutely. I think that death is a natural part of the pecking order of things, right?
Absolutely.
And I do agree. Humans in America, we tend to freak out over the thought of death and everything like that. But if you look at other cultures, they look at death as just another form of life, right? In,
Absolutely.
in order to die, you have to cross over, or depending on what you believe in. If you believe in reincarnation, you get reincarnated into something else. And I think that it's very important to bring the conversation, bring the topic of death up, and talk about it, because uh, we have a very hard or very bad way of coping with death.
We really do. We really, really do. I became a certified death doula a few years ago, and I always try to explain people like being born and dying are the two things that we naturally know how to do. So like, don't. It's part of life. Like everybody's gonna die. We're not gonna get out of it. So we have to have these uncomfortable conversations. Like we just have to. The more you talk about it, the less uncomfortable it gets.
Absolutely. And speaking about death, like even last night, I was laying in bed, and I was just thinking, and the next thing I know, I got on the top, like the thought of I'm gonna die someday, and like I started getting a little bit of an anxiety attack, and I had to reel myself back in and say, but that day is not today, so
It's not today. We
live
woke up
that
on the
day.
right side of the dirt today. We're good. We're
Yep,
good.
yep, we're not 6 feet under. But before we get into Dominique's story and talk more, Dominique. Uh, During the month of October, we have been doing these more macabre episodes of Sitting with Sean or Getting Spooky with Sean. And we're talking to either people that have experienced paranormal activity in their home or the space in which they walk around in, or we have talked to people who work in the paranormal field, investigators. Dominique herself, she's a psychic medium. We have a demonologist coming up next week, and then the following week we have an exorcist, and it's all leading up to this one common theme of getting that conversation about the paranormal, about death, about demonic forces out there and talking about it regularly so that we can look for the signs, we can see the signs and know how to work around those and work with people that do this for a living. So,
Right. I love
yeah.
that.
So before we get into the topic of all of that, all of the madness and all the cool stuff that we want to talk about, Dominique, how's your morning going?
It's going good. Like I said, we woke up on the right side of the dirt today. We have another day to do all the things, whatever comes our way. That's what we're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What's the weather like?
It is gorgeous here. We are in Eastern North Carolina, and it's been like in the 90s and like low hundreds for months. And today I woke up and it was like 65 degrees. I'm like, is it fake fall? Are we getting a little cool weather today? Like, it's nice. So we'll see.
Nice. I used to live in North Carolina. I lived there from 2011 to 2016, toward the
Oh,
tail
wow.
end, and it was one of the more beautiful states that I've ever lived in, and more
I love
beautiful
it.
locations. I
Right.
really enjoyed the weather. I really enjoyed being around the people, and I had never experienced controlled burns either, so that was pretty cool.
Oh, we do those here. Yeah, we do those a lot here. Yeah, we have the beach 15 minutes away, and then 5 hours you have like the Blue Ridge Parkway. Like it's perfect. We have all the things. All the things.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I lived in Fayetteville, so when I was in the army, I
You're
was
in the,
stationed
I
at
would say you're
Fort
in the
Bragg.
military, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
I lived at Fort Bragg, or now
Mm.
Fort Liberty,
I
and
was gonna say, they changed it recently, right? Yeah.
yeah, I have a deep
Same.
seated, yeah, deep seated like love hate relationship for Fort Bragg. So when people say Fort Liberty, I'm like, you mean Fort Bragg?
You mean Fort Yeah, we're at Lejeune, so I totally get it. Totally get it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. Oh,
funny.
you guys are close. You guys are close to Cherry Point, yeah.
Yeah, Cherry Point's like 30 minutes away. My partner is with MARSOC, so
Okay.
he's on base all the time. We could literally throw a rock and hit every base in town. It's not far. They're everywhere here. It's fun.
Speaking of Cherry Point, there is a haunted house attraction down there, and I have only been there once, and that haunted house attraction has like sparked my love for haunted houses.
Are you talking about the Nightmare Factory?
Yes.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's the best. Hands down, it's my favorite spot. Like haunted like attractions in the area. It's great. They're
Yeah.
fantastic. And they're good people too.
Oh
Like
yeah.
good people run it. So it's really nice.
I think it had a lasting effect on me because of the houses, but just the first house you have to go into to get to the other ones. That year, I don't know if they still do it, but it was the mausoleum where you had to crawl up and get to the top and then crawl all the way back down. A lot of people are claustrophobic, right? So that automatically eliminates them, and they're like, I don't want to do it. But then you add the
That would be
factor of
me.
people.
What's funny is I love real life scary stuff. I do not do scary things like that. Like I don't do scary movies. I don't do any of that stuff. Like my kids and my partner love it. And I'm like, y'all are a bunch of weirdos. Like go have fun. I'll hold your phone. Thanks. I'm good. I'll take it.
The crazy thing about the Nightmare Factory is I read that Rob Zombie went there and he actually was like, "This is one of the best ones in the
Yeah.
country."
Yeah, that was a big deal around here. It blew up. Like everybody
Yeah,
talked about it.
yeah,
They're really really nice people that run it. They're genuinely good to their community too. So it's good. We really like Nightmare Factory.
that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to a haunted attraction this year, and I'm really excited about it. I love it. I hadn't been to one in a few years. The last one I went to was in Alaska, and it was just like super small, and it was really cold around that time of year. But now I'm excited to get into a little bit more of the fall season, the fall feel, cold apple cider, pumpkin pie, stuff like that. I'm really excited
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, I'm a summer person all day, but I'm ready for the fall to arrive. Like I'm ready for it. I'm so ready for the fall to get here this year. For sure.
Right. Right. All right. So we're going to go ahead and dive into it. Dominique, when did you discover that you had abilities in the psychic?
So I guess it sounds weird, but I've always been this way since I was a very, very little girl. I can't remember a time I didn't have my guide with me, and you can read about it in our book, and you'll hear about it. I always tell these stories, the same story all the time, because everybody wants to know kind of how it started. But even as a very little girl, I could always see my guide, and I would get really frustrated because my parents wouldn't talk to him, and nobody else. I was like, "How rude are you people?" Because he's right here. And I remember as I got older, I was in third grade and I was in my teacher's classroom, and I went up and told her, like, your mom really likes her classroom. She really likes the books you're reading, and on and on and on about this woman, because it was odd for a third grade. I was like, "Who's this crazy lady in our class? She's new. Let's
Yeah.
this is exciting. We have a guest in our classroom." And my teacher called my mom that day after school, and she's like, "Does she do this all the time?" And my mom was like, "Yeah, she does." She's like, "Well, my mom died a few months ago, so I don't know." And so that's how my mom kind of sat down, and she's like, "Listen, we don't talk about this at school. We live in the South. That was a big no-no back
Yeah.
in the 80s. That was not something we talk about." And I'm going to age myself a little, but we didn't talk about that stuff back then. So that's when I realized, okay, things are different. And my mom was very much I have a very dysfunctional type of family. Like, I was raised in a very weird way. But my mom would take me to see Sylvia Brown, John Edwards. She would get me books. She would take me to seminars from like 10 and like up kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's always been natural to me. I would have no clue what to do if I woke up and it was just gone one day. I would
Yeah.
probably freak out. I don't know what I'd do.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think that having a parent that is supportive of your abilities is very paramount, right?
Yeah, it was incredible. Absolutely.
There's a lot of people in the country that don't, that don't have that, and they're outcast. And even up into the 80s, I've read reports that if you said that, hey, I hear things that aren't natural, or I see things that aren't natural, you're institutionalized. And
Absolutely.
I think that, like, now the conversation of psychic abilities, mediumship, and everything like that is becoming so normalized that it's not weird to say, hey, I hear things that aren't here, or
Yeah,
I
I
see
I
things
I
that aren't
see
here.
them. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're there. Yeah, I mean, even like in the even early 2000s, if you heard voices or seen things, you were considered schizophrenic. A lot of the times, I mean, I am, and I absolutely attribute my. I had a mother and two grandfathers that raised me, and they were all very different lifestyles. So I got different perspectives from each one of them, and I know for a fact, without all three of their perspectives, I would not be doing this today. I would have just been shut down like most. We lose some incredible, talented, I guess, soul workers of kind of what I've always called them,
Mhm.
because we're always told, "Oh, you're imagining that. That's not real. You're not hearing that." And that's why most children, we're all kind of born psychic. That's why most children between like 7, 9, 10, they'll stop talking about it, because it's kind of society's damping it out, and then they stop using it and it goes away. Or at least it kind of gets patted down and you don't know it anymore. So I was absolutely beyond measure blessed and grateful for the way I was raised. Absolutely.
I'm under the understanding, and I don't know if you believe this or not, but I'm under the understanding that everybody is imbued. I guess imbued is the best term that I can use. Imbued with abilities, and it all determines on if they are willing to accept those, or if they're willing to expand on those. Do you kind of believe the same thing?
Yeah, I think we are all absolutely born with a very strong intuitive ability. We're all kind of born psychic. I do believe that we have to do the work once we hit a certain age, and I'm a firm believer, like, you got to do your work, not just with, your spiritual side and understanding this, but in life as a whole, we have to do our work. And each soul is brought here to learn certain lessons, and this is part of it. But I absolutely believe, that's why I always tell people, if a kid doesn't trust somebody, you need to trust that kid, because their intuition's a lot stronger than an adult's, because they have this pure, genuine, unscrewed with intuition. So yeah, absolutely. Everybody's born with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I, you know, I have some that I work on, and I try to hone a little bit. And some of my abilities became more prevalent when I was in hostile environments, which is weird.
No, your
Um,
intuition's stronger. It's a fight or flight thing. It's a survival mode. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've noticed is, if you get around a lot of people that are in tune with their abilities, your natural abilities get stronger.
absolutely. It's
Is that
amplified
some?
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Is that something that you've experienced?
I can definitely agree with that 1,000%. I've worked with a lot of paranormal investigators and different groups, and I can definitely tell, like, the real ones from like these very clickbaity type people, which I guess what I call them. Because if they're trusting their intuition and it's growing, you will see the energy in the room literally shift. It's wild, but I absolutely agree with that 100%.
Absolutely. So moving on, moving forward. One question I asked the last person that I interviewed, when you got to the phase where you started honing your abilities and you started really working on them, have you ever had somebody that tested you, be like, "You're psychic, tell me something I don't know"?
They're my favorite. They're always my favorite. Hands down, they're my favorite. I myself am a skeptic. I believe that probably 90-95% of the people in this line of work are complete frauds. They are feeding off of people's grief and pain and trauma, and you can read body language very well. It's natural for humans to be able to normally look at someone and tell if they're close. But I'm a huge skeptic, but I love when my clients will be like, well, if this is really my cousin, brother, whatever, then tell me this. And it always amazes me. You can go back, like I talk about my clients, like situations, not their personal stuff without their permission. My clients have to sign off if they want me to discuss it. If not, I don't discuss it. It's very private. But some of my favorite ones, hands down, that we've made content for, because it's always those ones that are like, okay, you have to tell this story. Because they're like, holy shit, sorry. They're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, this is real. You got to tell it. But it's like one of my favorites is a client was like, so if this is really my nephew, then what color was his favorite car? And I'm like, I don't know what color his favorite car was, but he's showing me like a little red ATV and like flipping it and standing up and being like, holy crap, that was really close. And his uncle was like, oh my God, that's crazy. And on the same call with his mom, and she was like, what is he talking about? And he was like, oh, nothing, just nothing. It's fine, because one of the last times him and his nephew were together, they rolled an ATV where they weren't supposed to be, and mom didn't know that they were on the ATV. And so, like, he emailed me later and was like, "Oh my God, that's crazy." So it's always those it's those signs that we're not going to get when people come in. They're like, "Well, if it's my dad, they're going to say this," and I'm like, "No, they're not. They're going to say something totally different." That nobody else is going to know except for you and them, but it's never what they expect. But to me, I think that's way more powerful because it's just validating, like, no, that's really that's really your person. I love that personally. So I love being tested. Like, do it. Come on, bring it.
I I I tested two of my psychic friends back in December,
Hmm.
January timeframe, and I really shouldn't have. I they and this is a little short story. I was going through some things in a relationship, and I was in this place of like just mental anguish. And I went to both of them, and I didn't necessarily explain the situation, but they were like, explain the situation to me. They're like, "Hey, man, this is happening," and I'm like, "Really?" Like, and I took that stance, even though I believe in the paranormal and the supernatural. I was like, "Really? Are we really? You really think that?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, prove it." One showed me a picture, the other one gave me a name, and it blew me away. And
Right.
it was exactly who I thought it was. And it, and it just further solidified like that people that are in tune with their abilities can actually perform these acts. And so I made a pact to myself, and I made a promise to myself, I will never test a psychic medium, because sometimes they'll give you the answers that you want, and those answers you want are not the ones that are best for you.
It's not the ones that you want to hear. It's the ones that you
Yeah.
need to hear, not the ones you want to hear. That's how that
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you move on, and you start honing some of your abilities. When did you actually step into the role of helping people out, and like getting out there and doing some work for other people?
Oh, I was the typical like high school kid. I guess not typical, but I was doing like offering tarot readings and stuff at our local pizza shop in like high school because that's what, teenagers do, right?
Yeah.
Um, I started doing it more between like 18 and 20 where I would like advertise it more.
Mhm.
Um, but again, like down here, like in the South where we were, that wasn't really something you're supposed to do. I live in a very small town. If you know where Camp Lejeune is, like
Yeah.
is tiny besides the military. Then I think I was approached by my first like detective. I was probably 22, 23, and they were like, I know you can't give us an answer, but like, what's your insight? And all I could do was kind of tell them what I was seeing, what I was feeling. And that's how detectives started contacting me. And so that was kind of fun. It's just kind of always been this way. I didn't really start pushing really, really hard until probably my 30s, where I was started traveling to like expos and traveling to my clients at that point because I would get requested come to Kentucky or Virginia. And I was like, okay, cool, let's do it. And ever since then, I think I really jumped in with both feet. I do have two children. Well, they're not children anymore; they're adults. But I tried to like keep it private as far as like blasting like advertising. But by the time my daughter was in high school, she was telling everybody, my mom talks to dead people. My mom does this. And so I was like, well, if you're going to throw me out under the bus, then I guess this is what we're doing now. So I tried to protect them as much as I could. But by the time they were teenagers, it was over. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
everybody can know now. Let's just talk about it all the time now. So that's what we do.
When you were in school and before you started doing all this stuff, were and you were coming out and you were talking about it,
Hmm.
was there some backlash from people? Like,
Oh, yeah, for
what was
sure.
that like?
Um, it's I don't know. I believe in having small groups of friends. I'm not like a ton of friends kind of person, but it was definitely, some people are very judgmental. I mean, even to this day, people are just very judgmental, and that's okay. I have no hate towards people that are not comfortable with this. That is their right, and I don't like shame them for them or be like, well, you need to believe. That's not fair of me to do. If I want them to accept me, I need to accept them too. But yeah, of course, we got backlash from like friends, or friends' parents wouldn't want their friends hanging around me anymore, and that was okay. That's all right.
The way you described it kind of reminds me of the scene from Annabelle Comes Home. I know you don't like horror movies, but
Petrified
um,
adults. Petrified adults.
I can imagine. I don't like dolls either, but
Petrified.
there's a scene in the movie where the daughter of Ed and Lorraine Warren is in school, and
Mm-hmm.
kids are coming up to her and saying, "Hey, look, sorry, we can't come to your school because we're too young to know
Yeah.
what death is about." And
Right.
the way you described it literally reminded me of that scene from that movie because when you come out and you talk about these things, like it starts to become this secluding action, right? You start secluding yourself,
Absolutely.
but the cool thing is you will start interacting with people that you never knew you would interact with because of their what they believe in.
Absolutely, 1,000%. And I absolutely love that. Now, I do love Ed and Lorraine Warren. Again, if it's based on a true story, I will watch it. Like, I loved The Winchester House. I loved The Conjuring. Those were based on true stories. So I was all in, but don't give me some freaky slasher movie. But I really, really, really would love to get to be in the same space as the Annabelle doll. It doesn't look like the doll on the movies, but I
No.
think that'd be really cool. I'm fascinated by those things because I absolutely believe them 100%. But it was isolating in some ways, but again, everything happens for a reason. And then I ended up finding people I would have never walked up to, and now they are literally some of my best friends I've had for like 30 years. So that's just what it is, and I love that.
Yeah, I do love true story stuff. I love the story about, the Conjuring movies with Ed and Lorraine Warren because they were real people, real
Hmm.
passionate people about the supernatural, but also just kind-hearted people.
Right.
And I got to interview some people that worked under them. That was really cool because they carry that same characteristic of kind-heartedness and caring for other people in their life that Ed and Lorraine did. And so it's awesome that the influence that Ed and Lorraine Warren had and shifting the culture and talking about the paranormal to now, we're here and we're doing it on the internet
Absolutely.
and nobody's going to ask questions.
Right. And if they, yeah, absolutely. Ed and Lorraine did so much for the community, and I mean, as a whole, it's absolutely amazing. I'm fascinated. I'm actually part of a lineup at the Para Unity Expo in New Jersey, and John Zaffris is going to be up there, and I'm super excited. Like, I've never got to meet John. I'm fascinated. I'm like, I want to go sit on one of his seminars. Can I please take my break while he's doing a seminar? Because I just want to go listen to him. I think it'd be really cool.
If I'm not wrong, and I might be, but if I'm not wrong, Tony Sparrow is going to be there too.
Yeah, there's a lot of really important people. Like, a lot of the big names in the paranormal are going to be there. I was actually had a reading with, again, I'm a super skeptic, like for real. There's very few practitioners in my field that I trust, and I utterly adore Chip Coffey with my
Oh yeah.
whole soul. He's like my like dream mentor, and I got to have a chance to have a conversation with him. And that's actually the reason I'm going up there. He's very good friends with the people that work there, and he ended up talking to me about talking to them, and they were like, "Hey, let's have a conversation." And by the end of our conversation, they were like, "Yeah, be up here in November." And I'm like, awesome, I'm excited. But yeah, all the guys from like the old Ghost Hunters and Ghost Brothers, and It used to be Destination Fear. I don't know what it is now. A bunch of people are going to be up
Project
there.
Fear.
That's what it's called. I have never watched a single episode. I should be ashamed of myself. But I have not. I used to love Ghost Hunters because Steve is like the kindest human
Yeah.
you will ever talk to in your life. So I'm super excited to go up there and meet a few of those folks. So yeah,
Now,
it'll be fun.
being a psychic medium, do you watch some of the paranormal shows that are out?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I'm super behind on some. I work a lot. I
Okay.
work a lot of weird hours, but I will go and like binge a bunch of them, like back to back
Okay.
really quickly. I'm really into Dead Files. The
Yeah.
gentleman detective from Dead Files is going to be up there too, and I'm
Oh,
excited to
nice.
see him. But
Nice.
it's 2 days of just a lot of fun. It's going to be so much fun. We'll be do readings all weekend. It'll be great. It'll be super
That's
fun.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
I used to be really big into Ghost Adventures, and I watched every episode, right? Like
yeah,
all the way up till probably season 12, and then like I started noticing nuances and some of the cast members, and I'm not going to say who, I don't want to put that out, but
I ain't
I
trying to.
started.
Right?
I'm not trying to get you in trouble. You have a career, I
Oh,
don't.
I used to love Ghost Adventures back in the day. That was like loved it years ago. It was good.
Yeah, and I would notice some nuances in some of the cast members, and I was like, this doesn't seems really scripted and just over the top,
Right,
and I was just like, I can't watch it anymore. I'll catch an episode or two here or there if I find a location that I think they're investigating, but that I
right.
really want to see. But for me, I'm just like, you know what, it's
I
not
mean,
for me.
clickbait's a thing. It's a thing.
Yeah,
It happens. One you should definitely check out though is, believe it or not, Jack Osborne is
yeah.
incredible and he's very
Portals to hell.
knowledgeable. He's very, very knowledgeable. So definitely suggest that one. But it's one of those things. Like I enjoy the paranormal as a whole. I really enjoy it, and there's nothing wrong with watching it. And whether you believe it or not, it's totally fine. I love watching paranormal stuff.
Yeah, I watch a lot on YouTube as well. I think there's two creators on YouTube, and I speak highly of them. One is Paranormies, and they're out of Canada, and they just do strictly Canadian investigations. And
Okay,
then there's another group called Mindseed TV, and that's Casey Nolan. He started off really small, and then he just created this empire where he goes all over the place. And his next season he's going to be doing is going to be in Japan,
that's where my
and
daughter's at. It's haunted as crap in Japan. It's
yeah.
crazy haunted in Japan.
Yeah, any, and I will say, out of all the paranormal videos that I've seen, from Nuke Stock Five and all these other places, all these other people that put out content, the most terrifying paranormal evidence that I have seen has come from Japan or come from like the Middle East,
It's terrifying.
because
Absolutely,
oh, absolutely, Japan has some of the scariest paranormal activity, and then in the Middle East, you're dealing with the jinn, and that is just terrifying.
it is absolutely. My daughter is in the Navy and she's stationed in Japan. And she, bless her, there's a 13-hour time difference, and she'll literally call me and be like, "Mom, we're going in this hotel. It's been torn down for years, but I need you to come with me." And I'm like, "Oh my God, my child, my
Oh,
daughter. Okay, this is what we're doing." So she'll call me and we'll walk through it. I'm like, "Bella, get out. Just will you please walk out of that building? Thank you very much.
right
Let's
now,
not do this, please."
now, because you are psychic and you do the work, do your children have abilities, or have they told you?
My son is 17. He has autism, and I'm a firm believer that children or individuals on the spectrum, because they don't have that society norm washed over them, that they have
Yeah.
very strong intuition. And he's at my son is absolutely psychic 1,000%, and he doesn't communicate it the way we do. He was nonverbal for years and years. But yeah, he can absolutely. It blows my mind how he'll say something and we'll be like, "We need to make a note of that," and we'll notice it weeks down the road. And I'm like, "Huh, that's interesting." So he definitely picked it up a lot. My daughter's very sensitive to things. She's super sensitive, but she doesn't connect to those that have crossed over like I do. At least not yet. I don't, she may later, but she's very, very sensitive to people and places very quickly. She really is.
Gotcha. Well, that's awesome to see, that your kids are picking up on some of these things that you
Mhm.
have. Now, moving forward, one of the one of the things I'm really interested in is how you communicate with the supernatural or the paranormal. When you get into sessions or you're doing work with people, is it just a spirit comes and sits next to you or stands next to you and talks to you, or is it one of those things where you're like, hey, I'm calling out to whoever's out there, let's figure this out?
Okay, so there are two different type. I mean, everybody gets messages differently, but there's that's kind of broken down to an open channel and a closed channel. Someone that is a closed channel, when you come in, you're looking for one person in particular. Normally, they'll ask you like a name or your relationship. They will kind of reach out and try to pull them in. I work as an open channel. And again, Chip Coffey worded it in a very funny way, but it's very accurate. He's like, it's like walking into a foggy room and having a bunch of people around you, and you're trying to decipher which one you're supposed to get pulled to. But when I sit down with clients, I have my guy that a very good friend of mine and a client that turned friend that was a client. She refers to him as like my spiritual bouncer, and he kind of like is what I call my gatekeeper.
Mhm.
And normally when I sit down for a session, I'm like pointing back, like you guys can see them. Um, like client will sit down, and normally somebody from the other side will be like their go-to, kind of like their host for the day. They will connect with my guide, and that's how they draw people in. So whether it's 1 or 10, it doesn't matter. We just kind of organically let them come in, but I do see them pretty much the same way I see you sitting in front of me. It's just a different level of filter, I guess. But I see and feel them, and pretty much like I do people. So yeah, I work as an open channel, and we kind of let whoever wants to come in come in.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you ever come across spirits that are like more malevolent, and you're like, well, we can't talk to you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why like again, that's why my client calls him my bouncer, because if it's not safe for me, he normally doesn't let them get like I can feel them out there. I can feel them like on the edge of a room, but they're not allowed in my space. I don't play those games. Now, of course, I have been to different places and had different clients come in where they're very strong, where I have to really kind of, I guess they kind of call it suit up, or really like, no, we got to put my defenses up because I can feel them trying to push. But for the most part, um, I've kind of got a hold on it for the most part. But you can definitely feel them. You can definitely feel them. They're definitely there. Um, I do believe like in demons and negative energies, but I do not believe it is common as a lot of like the TV shows and stuff make it out to be. Just because it's negative does not make it demonic. It just doesn't. Yes, it'll get more viewers, but it doesn't make it demonic. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't believe that everybody that thinks that they're infested with demons are actually infested with demons or
Right.
have demonic activity. Yeah, you got negative and oppressive feelings, but you don't have the demonic forces around you that you
It's
think you
a
do influencing you.
Yeah, it's very different. It's a very different feel. And I'm
Oh
sure
yeah.
whenever you speak to the individual that performs exorcisms, I'm sure they'll be able to tell you there's a very clear difference. It's a totally different feel. It's absolutely different.
Oh, absolutely. And I just think at the end of the day we need to be able to decipher, and that's on your job is to be able to decipher. Okay, this is a negative entity, this is demonic, and this is like a good energy that is allowing
Right.
us, that's working with us and really communicating. One of the things that I experienced a few years ago was it felt like I was in this just dark room, and then like small little pictures were coming to me, and I'd be able to piece them together, put them together, and like build this like pretty much picture of like what I'm
Yeah.
looking at. And I would explain it to people and they're like, what?
So
And
that makes
and
sense.
it would come from like one person, and I would say, okay, I'm seeing this, that, and the third, put it together, boom. And eventually, like I literally built this picture, and one of my buddies just broke down, started crying. I was like, what happened? And I didn't mean to like do anything, but he was like, that was for my aunt's funeral. I was like,
Right.
wow. And so like it was it for me, that's the first like solidifying bit of information I've given people. But I try to stray away from doing that because I don't want to scare people.
I get that.
Yeah, I have been told that I have some abilities and I'm working on them now, but it's definitely a different feeling when you're surrounded by those energies and you're kind of like working with them versus like just in your natural world where you're putting up your barriers, you're putting your armor on, you're saying I don't want to communicate with this.
Right, absolutely. And that's kind of how we receive things sometimes. is I will start off with a session with clients, and a lot of the times, I do like a scratch pad, not because I have to, but it kind of helps sometimes keep those pieces together. Like I can scratch it over here and put it over here and put this over here. And I always tell people by the end of the session, I'm like, oh, this is referring to this and it's connected to this. And we put these pieces together. And then we're like, oh, now we get it. It all makes sense now. Like all these little symbols and tiny pieces all fit together. And that's
Yeah.
pretty much how it works.
Now you spoke about earlier about working with detectives and working on some cases to help find either missing persons or cases where people have been murdered.
Mhm.
What was that like for you being in that and doing that? Was that very emotional, or did you try to disconnect your emotions from the situation?
It was very emotional. So it's very hard. That's why I try not to do it. If I don't, unless like somebody asked, I'm not going to go out of my way because I can't. It's hard because I have a really soft spot for children and old people. I have a really soft spot for them, and so I have issues getting too close. I try to separate it. My absolute favorite, hands down, my favorite like solved case is a girl I met with. Gosh, good lord, this is what happens. Like when I start talking about it, I told you like it glitches.
Yeah.
So how it happens. But one of my favorite clients, probably 5, 6 years ago, she came in for a session and I kept talking about her father that had been murdered. And it's a very known case. It's all over the news, but in newspapers, it was a lot. And I was going through it and I kept getting these initials and I kept seeing a toolbox in the back of his car. And she was like, it all makes sense, but the toolbox, I don't know. So later on, I sat down with her again, with her and her mother, and went through all the things. And again, the toolbox showed up. They were like, doesn't make sense. I mean, everything else is on point, but toolbox don't make sense. It probably was about a year or so later. She called me. She was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm driving to my client. She's like, I need to talk to you. You need to pull over. And I was like, this is going to be good. I'm so excited. What's going on? And she got her mom on the phone and she said, we figured out the toolbox. And I was like, what are you talking about? And her husband was murdered in the 80s.
Mhm.
And I don't know like how in depth you want me to go with this, but it's kind of all part of it. But he was bludgeoned to death with a hammer and he was found dead inside of his car. But the serial killer that killed him, that was not his MO. Like he didn't beat people in the head with a hammer. Um, and I guess her daughter, her other daughter was listening to a podcast, and I have talked to that podcast since then, and we had a whole thing. But apparently there was a 2 year period where this other serial killer rode with him, um, with Lee, and they were kind of cruising along for 2 years. And this other man's MO was beating people to death with a hammer, and his last name was Tool. And I didn't, it all that look on your face is the look I had on my face. And
Wow.
as soon as she said it, it flooded me like 1,000 pounds weight just flew over me. And her father immediately like jumped in my space, and I watched the toolbox disappear. And he, to this day, has never come back to me ever, ever, ever again. I've had
Wow.
sessions with him many times, and he has never shown back up. And I was like, "Holy shit, your dad just solved his own murder!" And it was the craziest, coolest experience. And they talk about it. They will tell everybody the story. They have shared their experience in my book. They each wrote an excerpt about how they felt and what they went through. So it was very cool. So those things I love. But if it has to do with kids, I'm probably not going to do a very, I try to separate because it's hard with children. I have a hard time doing that. But that was
Yeah,
hands down my favorite for sure. My
I
favorite.
can understand. I can understand
It
that.
was
That
wild.
is intense.
Who you telling? I was like, no way. Like, shut up. Nuh-uh. That's exactly how that whole conversation went. But I will never forget the way that toolbox just, I watched disintegrate right in front of my eyes. And I was like, holy cow, that just happened. But yeah, he
Wow.
has never come back to me since then. And I've sat with them several times and he's like, no, I'm good. I'm at peace now. You figured it out.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the reality of it now. And it was just very cool.
Yeah. I One other question I have, do, and this is a common, I don't know, this is a common theme, like when you watch paranormal movies or movies like that with psychics. Do do you feel like spirits try to enter your body to relay a message, or
Absolutely.
is it one of those things where you're like, I'm not letting you in my space. You can talk to me, but I'm not letting you in the space.
Some souls are just a lot stronger than others. Some have a lot more of a point to prove, I guess. Now, with me personally, they normally walk me through the week before they're passing, the day of their actual passing, and then like a day or two after. That's normally the window they walk me through. I will feel it, see it, smell it. It's not because they're entering my body, that's just how they're relaying it to me. So if I have like a really sharp pain in my abdomen, or if I feel like a sudden impact to my chest, like the hard impact to my chest normally feels like a car accident where they died suddenly, or I will feel an explosive feeling in my head, or whatever it is. But it normally fades out after a couple hours, and my body's aware of what's happening. It can kind of like, don't freak out. It's not happening to you. You're just processing it out. Like I said, I have had a few situations where the energy of the person is so strong and they try to push in, and I can normally be like, we're not doing that today. But sometimes it's harder than others. But for the most part, we got to hold on it normally.
Awesome. Awesome. So, what is in the future for Dominique?
Oh gosh, I'm always doing something. I don't sit still very well. So we have a workbook that we have that's about to be printed. I'm super excited about to work on grief. We're doing the expo in New Jersey. I'm telling you, we're always doing something. I was supposed to be in Savannah today, but schedules clashed. I was supposed to do a big paranormal thing down there, but we're always working with paranormal investigators and clients and groups, and we're always doing stuff. Always doing stuff.
What bit of advice would you give to somebody that feels like they have psychic abilities or want to work in the mediumship, and they're on that teetering edge, but they're a little bit afraid to step out?
I'm a firm believer in to trust your intuition. Try to differentiate your ego and your intuition. A lot of times, the people that don't have like the best intentions, they're led by ego. There's a difference between like saying what you think is going to happen compared to what you feel is going to happen. So trust your instincts above all else. A really cool exercise to do for people that want to really work on this is when you have like a vision or you get a feeling, write it down. This is going to sound a little elaborate, but I promise it works. Write it down, stamp it, and mail it to yourself, like in an envelope. So that way, when it comes back, it's postmarked with that date. You can't lie to yourself or anybody else. And then when it happens, you can pull it out and be like, okay, and then note on it, oh, this is when it happened, or this is what it correlates to. I have a stack of those from years ago that I did. Um, it's really trusting your intuition. You just have to trust it. Be careful studying under people. Be careful doing these fly by night mediumship and tarot reading and scrying classes for like a weekend, and you can start charging for readings. Don't do those. You just have to trust your instincts. Truly, you do.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, Dominique, where can we find you? Not physical location, but social
I
media.
mean, we're good with that. It's just dominiqueogorman.com. We're on all the social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the things. We have virtual sessions. So if you're not local to me, I have clients all over the world. So we do virtual sessions just like this, and it does not impact like the the strength of your reading. It doesn't matter if you're in the same space with me or not. So really, we're kind of everywhere, and I always try to make sure I meet my clients kind of where they are. If they want a psychic reading, we'll just do a psychic reading. If you want just a mediumship, we'll focus on just connecting somebody over. But we kind of do an all encompassing reading too. So we have something for everybody.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Dominique, I want to thank you for spending this time with me and hanging out with me and sharing your experience as a psychic medium and as a death worker. I think what you do is underappreciated and undervalued. And I think that what you have to offer this world and what you have to offer everybody around you is just something that is so much more than what people give a lot of psychics and a lot of mediums credit for. So thank
Well,
you
thank
for
you.
everything that you do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I really, really do. And I'm super excited to hear the other episodes this month. I'm super excited to hear those. Those are going to be good.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome, and I'm not going to reveal who the next guest is. You guys are going to have to see, but I will let you know it's super exciting and it's really in depth. And this person investigated Amityville. So until next time, I hope you guys have a good day. Stay spooky and be good. Much love.